Thanks so much for tuning into The Junction, where we're trying to make connections between Ardmorites. I'm Ardmore Leader News Director Michael Dean Smith, and joining us in The Junction this week is Ardmore City Manager Kevin Boatright. We're going to talk a little bit about some news made this week and also some comments we saw on our social media page after posting a story about the City Commission awarding a $15.6 million bid for that new police station. So, Kevin Boatright, thanks for joining us in The Junction this week.
Absolutely. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come speak.
So I want to just kind of quickly run down the story that we covered last week. City Commission awarding that bid for the new police station, public
Correct.
safety complex. And we found out that the money for that project is coming out of the city's GAPS tax.
Correct.
So would you mind just kind of briefly explaining what that GAPS tax is and what those types of funds are earmarked for?
Absolutely. Well, the GAPS tax was originally passed back in 2014, and it was on for 10 years, and then it was renewed here recently, this past year, and that was to renew it for an additional 10 years. That money is set aside for police and fire capital and some infrastructure. I can say in my time, the majority of it's been spent on police and fire capital. And when I say that, I kind of want to make sure that people understand what that means. That means anything that could be from buying fire trucks, which we've done that, to buying police cars, buying vests, any kind of safety equipment, all the jackets and everything that the firemen have to have, equipment that cleans the bunker gear and all that. You have to actually have special equipment to clean it. All of that goes into that. And so that's where the majority of that goes. There has been some infrastructure money spent, but if you were to look at it percentage-wise, the highest percentage is spent on police and fire capital.
Police. Okay. So with that GAPS tax, it's a half-cent sales tax, if I'm not mistaken, here in the city of Ardmore.
Yes.
About how much does that tax bring in, like on an annual basis?
Last time I checked, it was around 3.9 million, close to 4 million a year. And that seems like a lot. They're like, oh, capital, that's a lot. But if you've paid attention the last several years, we've built two new fire substations. That would be number 2 and number 3. The last one that was built was just finished last year. That'd be number 2, which is on East Main. And it was directly behind the old fire station number 2, which was built, I think, in the early 80s, about 81 or so. And so when you're building what I'm calling public safety facilities, be fire, police, what have you, those monies can go through in a hurry. The fire stations, I know, substations were over $2 million a piece. And then, as you mentioned, we've now got the City Commission to approve for a brand new police station, which is approximately $15.6 million.
Okay.
And so that is all fire and police capital.
So when we had posted that story to the Ardmore Leader Facebook pages, we had a lot of commenters questioning why the city was going to be spending money on that and not looking at street repairs.
Sure.
So kind of...
It's a good question.
Looking at that, what is then the status of the city's plan for street improvements? And can GAPS tax funds be used for those kind of projects?
Yes. To answer your question, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
It can be used. But as we do any project we do every year when we look at our budget, which our budget this year was approximately $130 million. But now that includes everything. I mean, anything you can think of in city government, capital, non-capital, payroll, insurance, everything.
Okay.
You look at that. When you do that, every year when we do it, we meet with the City Commission. We kind of go through with our department heads to set priorities, and then we go to the commission and try to get their input on what their priorities are. When we do that every year, we look at projects. And typically, when we look at these projects, we look at, I'm going to say, majority of our public safety facilities. Though when we have to build those, there are things that have usually been put off and put off and put off and put off and put off. So lately, to answer your question on GAPS, that money being spent on fire and police issues, it's because, our old fire station number 3 was actually one of the old public utilities buildings on Veterans Boulevard. That was meant for them to be there as a stopgap. It was supposed to be a short-term thing.
Just a temporary home.
Building, and it ended up being there, I believe, over 7 years. Wow. And so, we were housing our firefighters in our substation that really wasn't built to be a substation. And so, when we prioritized and looking at it, and we go through our budget each year, we're like, we got to start repairing these fire stations or replacing them. And so several years ago, we replaced number 3. Then, of course, it was number 2. We replaced it for the same reason. And now we got to the police station. And so our priorities are set based upon what we get from the department heads, what we get from our city commissioners. And so in the past, it has been mainly focused, going back to GAPS tax, mainly focused on fire and police capital issues. Some infrastructure has been put in there, but the reason it hasn't is because what I'm going to tell you now is about our plan. And part of the plan that we did, we started over 2 years ago, and you might remember this because I know that you pay attention to what we do, and that is that we had a study done on stormwater drainage. We had a comprehensive drainage study done. And the reason that was done was because about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, at one of the public meetings that we had, there was a lot of input from the citizens. And I, being the city nerd that I am, I kind of focused on the table that was for city infrastructure. Okay. And every person to a T that was at that table that spoke and gave input was, Kevin, it's streets and flooding. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't streets and flooding, it was flooding and streets. It was in this first, change those numbers. One's number 1, 2, but it depends on who you talk to. Mm-hmm. And so when we looked at that, we know that we have some major issues when it comes to streets and to flooding. So we had that comprehensive study done. It was just completed this last year. It took over 18 months to complete. Used Garver Engineering to do that study for us. And to make a long process short for this podcast, when we got to the end, they identified 17 flood-prone areas, and those flood-prone areas to be mitigated. One of the things we know is not just identify them and where they're at, but how much is it going to cost to fix them? And I don't know if you remember, part of that process, which I thought was great, and we got great input back, was we asked the citizens to get on. There was an interactive map where you could click and put pins. Where do you see the flooding in Ardmore? Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of people that got on there. I did it. My wife did it. Like every time it rains an inch, we know to avoid this intersection. Right. Because it's going to flood. And we have a lot of those. But the point was that we started all this process several years ago to get this done because we wanted to have good, objective data about where our problems are at. And then for me, as a city manager and the city commissioners making decisions, where is it that we needed the help the most? How is it going to be mitigated? And then the important question for me is, how are you going to pay for it? Right. I mean, that's the key question. And when we got done, it was in excess of $220 million. Wow. With one project, that would be the flooding on 12th and Commerce, which that intersection impacts a lot of people. That one project was over $27 million for that one area. And it wasn't because it's just, when you look at that intersection, you think, wow, that's a lot of money just to reconfigure that and try to get more drainage. Well, when you look at the comprehensive study that was done in that area, it actually encompassed about 3 blocks around that contributes to that flooding, where the water all runs to that area.
Where it's just pooling in that intersection. It's just
pooling in that, correct. Right. Because that's kind of the lowest spot. So that's where the water goes. Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking at those kind of, one project, $27 million, to fix all of them, $220 million, but it gave us, again, objective data that we could look at from engineers to say, here's what you need to do, here's how much it's going to cost. Then the other thing we did that was real key, and this is, again, getting to resolve these issues and not just say, we'll go to this intersection, fix that. We'll go to this street over in the tree streets, fix that. Well, if you're just doing that, you're just chasing yourself. Mm-hmm. What we wanted to do was look at comprehensive data that we could collect and objectively look at it and have a strategic plan on how we're going to attack it, how we're going to fix this issue. Because to be honest with you, Michael, when citizens call me about a street, and you could just randomly pick any street, I will say, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, you're probably correct. Because we have a bunch of bad streets and a lot of flooding. But the other part we did, I think the key other part we did, is we had a pavement assessment done. And this was a company out of Texas that came up, my words are, like a Google car, for the people that know what a Google car is.
With the camera on the top that kind of maps out
and it maps everything
on the
out
street
in your
surface.
neighborhood. And you can go to Google Maps and get on it, and it shows you like a street view of anywhere in Ardmore. Well, they had a car, had a camera on the top, but up in the front of it, I had a bunch of very sophisticated electronic data collecting equipment that assessed the pavement as they drove over it. So
they kind of look at the condition of it.
The condition of the street. So it drove over every single street in Ardmore, which is over 200 miles. They drove every single one. When they collected that data, and we have it on a dashboard we can look at, it showed us the assessment of that equipment of every single street down to 33 feet. So I can click on there and look at every 33 feet.
33-foot segments through the
all
whole city.
Through the whole city. And they classified those as excellent, very good, good, poor. Excellent, very good, good, fair, and poor.
Okay.
So what I did is when I looked there, well, to me, the two worst categories are the ones you need to look at, because there's going to some that are going to say, well, that's fair. That looks poor to me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, to be fair, let's look at everything that's rated as fair and poor. Well, when I did that and looked at the summary of those two categories, it was over 50 miles.
Wow.
Right.
And you said over 200 miles of road, over 50 miles of them were either in fair or poor condition.
Poor condition, according to that assessment that was done.
So about almost a quarter then
of
our
Ardmore
streets.
And then when you talk to engineers, which we did to do all of these studies, when you look at them, they say, Kevin, the average right now to build a street is $2.5 to $3 million a mile. So when I look at that and I say I got 50 miles, we're talking about another 100 million plus.
And again, to keep this in perspective, the entirety of Ardmore City budget this current fiscal year, about $130
million. Okay. And I think more pertinent to this conversation is in our street fund that's generated annually, the money that's collected now, Fund 21, it collects $3.5 to $3.8 million averaging per year for streets. So when I'm looking at a couple to 300 million to solve our drainage and street issues, but I'm only collecting 3.8 million a year, how long is it going to take me to get it done? It's virtually impossible.
With those numbers, that's going to be tough.
It is. And the thing is, to be completely transparent, is that doesn't just go into street construction. That goes into all the little things you see us doing around where they're fixing stormwater collection hoods where they're collapsing and stuff like that. We have situations all over town that we have stormwater issues, and some of them are in neighborhoods. I mean, right now we have several neighborhoods that were built 40, 50, 60 years ago. Those stormwater systems are collapsing. So we're having to go in and fix those. Well, that comes out of that street improvement fund. When we have to buy a new dump truck for the street maintenance guys for the work they're doing, that comes out of the street improvement fund. When I have to buy a new jackhammer attachment that they have to use where they bust out an area in order to form it and then correct it, that comes out of the street improvement fund. The guys that we have that work in our street department do an excellent job with what we've got. We have a concrete labor contract. We have all these different mechanisms, as you will, to try to address the smaller maintenance issues, because we don't lay asphalt. We don't have asphalt laying machines and do that. I say all of that to tell you, here's what our plan is. Now that we've spent several years collecting the data, is how do we attack the issues that we have and the poor conditions we have? And it's really, I'm going to say, there's a couple of things we're doing. One is, first, in this year's budget, and you can look at it, we put in there to purchase what's called an asphalt zipper. An asphalt zipper is a piece of equipment, and you can Google it and read it. There's videos and everything, but it attaches to a piece of our equipment, helps you chew up bad streets, basically just disintegrate them and chew them up into small little pieces. Then we would be allowed to come in with our grader, grade it out, our roller, pack it in and everything. This is after they've located obviously all the utilities on that block. And then our engineer, Mike Edge, is working on right now. I'm hoping if it's not out to bid now, it's going to go out soon, to do what's called an asphalt contract, so that when we do all this with asphalt zipper to prep it, we can have a contractor that would come right behind us and put an asphalt cap right on it. Now, there's specific streets this would work better on. And so when we evaluated this, which I have a list here of the streets we just went to look at, and I've got it here. This is the ones we went through the other day and looked through these, and you can see it in here on my handwriting. I even added some streets because it's amazing when you go out to look at streets people complained about. Well, then when I'm looking at them, I can look over at the next block and I'm like, guys, this block over here is as bad as this one, if not worse. The one that everybody's complaining about is bad, but that one's just as worse. It's just a bad condition. And so We went through that and looked at that, trying to find streets we thought that would be fit for this piece of equipment, that would be ideal to use it for this process of basically renovating a street. And you can say there's probably about 20 streets.
15 or 20 streets on there. And so these are all the streets you're planning on using that asphalt zipper
on.
To prep it in-house before having an outside company come in to
we want
finish it up.
to do the asphalt cap on it.
Okay.
And so these are ones, and if you look at them, you'll see there's some in the Northwest, but the majority of these are Southeast, Northeast that fit. And that would make sense because that is the older area of Ardmore. So there's a lot of older streets. But the asphalt zipper, so that would be one thing to try to speed up the process of what we can do in-house. You know, what limited resources we have, what can we do in-house to attack specific types of streets. Then the other thing that we're doing is when we're doing streets and contracting them out, people, and it's nobody's fault, unless you're involved in streets, don't realize what they cost. And so, like some of the streets we've done recently, and I have those here too, that we've done. You look at 8th Street Northwest, there was 3 blocks of that done. Well, that's the subdivision kind of behind Taco Bueno, Taco Bell.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, to the west of it.
Just west of Commerce.
That is correct. 8th Street Northwest, 3 blocks. We did that, and it's beautiful. I mean, it looks beautiful. $1.7 million. When we did the extension recently from Kiowa, from Merrick to the back of
the
where
traffic
Albertson's
circle,
grocery store,
right?
From the traffic circle. When we did that, that was probably less than half a mile. That ended up being a $1.5 million project. And then we go to the one we did here this last year at Sunset Drive in Hollingsworth, which if you've seen that,
close to the railroad tracks.
Across the railroad tracks, and I think you and I've spoken before where you talked about when that was all being tore up, you couldn't believe all the huge concrete boxes that were put in there, and you know, and I said yes, because it was a storm drainage issue as much as a street issue, because there was terrible flooding. So you said you saw the huge concrete boxes, and I'm like, yes, because they have to take care of the drainage issues underneath the road before they repair it.
Yeah, people driving over that road may see, you know, the newly paved, but they don't see all the underground infrastructure that was also a part of that project.
Absolutely, and a huge part of that cost. Well, that project was about $1.7 million. So when we're collecting a budget every year, the revenue stream coming in about 3.8, and I've got a project. Every project that we've done lately, I've listed out to you, has been 1.5, 1.7, 1.7. We've got some drainage that we did on Rosewood. It was $79,000. We're working on the Michelin Bridge because there's a Michelin Bridge over there. It's basically deteriorating underneath the bridge.
Okay. And
we're working on that. That is being done now. That was $442,000. They're finishing the Mile Bridge now, trying to get it done this week. That was $145,000. Where we have another issue that from the flood that happened in April. That event, it's on Holiday Drive.
Right. They're close to 12th.
Yes, close to the Brahms there in 12th on that end. That's about we haven't awarded it yet, but I've got the low bid. I think it's on this next city commission meeting on the agenda. It's about $400,000.
Wow.
So, and some of those are just as a result of the floods and the water issues that we have, which I didn't budget for that. So we have to take it out of something. And so some of that may be gaps that's thrown in there, but the majority of it's going to be street fund.
Out of that street fund.
And so I'm just telling you this just to give your listeners an idea of what public streets cost. Because I'm being honest with you, it's astronomical. I mean, the costs are unbelievable. But that's what we have to do to get good streets, is we have to have that fund. So going that avenue, again, I went to the city commissioners and said, hey, we need to really look at what revenue stream can we do to try to make a big impact. We've got hundreds of millions of dollars of streets and flooding, and this is the engineers telling us this. They've done the work. We've paid them good money to give us this analytical data and say, here's all your problems in Ardmore, Kevin. How do we attack trying to fund it when I've kind of explained to you some of our, even if we were to take more money from the gaps, even if we're doing that, we're not going to touch $300 million.
Right.
It's not. It's a drop in the bucket. So we started originally looking at a GO bond, or general obligation bond.
Okay.
And so we talked about that, which that's capturing additional property tax.
That's something, a mechanism similar to what schools use whenever they're trying to
yes, sir, absolutely.
Campuses.
And that's not popular. I realize increasing any tax is not popular. I don't enjoy saying when somebody says, hey, you need to pay more. on the tax. I don't enjoy that either. But we had to look at some mechanism. Well, when we looked at it and really crunched the numbers, for us as a city, and talked with our finance director and our bond attorney, it didn't make sense because, unfortunately, when you do a GO bond, when you do that, and because it deals with property tax and the way it's structured, statutorily, you have to, when you go through all that, there are a ton of bonding fees, financing fees, a bunch of additional fees you have to pay that actually wouldn't be put into the road. Mm-hmm. I mean, a huge percentage of the cost would be for those bonding fees and financing fees. And like you said, the schools have to go through that, but they really don't have a choice.
They're pretty much limited to that one single lane.
That's kind of their stream to do the bond, to fix whatever their needs are. They're limited on that.
Okay.
And that's unfortunate for them. But for us, we said, well, what else can we do? So we started looking at adding a 1 cent sales tax. We just looked at historical collections, and based upon our past collections, in about a 10-year period, we could generate, we think, 70 to 80 million. Well, that's not the 300 for all the streets and that, but you know what? It's a large chunk of money that we can go into and actually make some big impacts, get a lot of drainage projects done, get several of our streets, long runs of streets fixed. And in anticipation of that, that's why we started a year ago, I think it was a year ago this past July, with the engineering for the section of Mile. That would be Mile Road between Rockford all the way down to Valley Ranch, about a 2.5 mile section. We started engineering on that. There's still engineering on it. People, that's the other thing. I think a lot of maybe your listeners don't realize that when you do huge, large public works and or public utilities projects, just the engineering phase is expensive and it takes a long time.
It's a lengthy process. Things definitely don't move fast on those fronts.
Absolutely not. And it's not fast enough for me either.
Right.
But it's the reality. It is what it is. And so we have that being done. And right now, the preliminary estimate to do that section is over 10 million, which would go kind of right in line with our 2.5 to 3 million per mile. And that would be replacing that bridge on Mile, widening it because it's way too narrow, putting shoulders on it, make it like the road should look instead of what we have. But so that is kind of the conclusion, I guess, if you will. How do we get to make some big impacts and improve our terrible drainage and our terrible street issues? And one thing I'd like to point out is, because people say, well, sales tax, that's, it's another tax, and I get it. And then my job is not to convince you. You just need to like it or you need to accept it. I'm just trying to say, we've done the data. We've collected the data. We've had experts come in and pinpoint where our issues are the worst. And this is what it cost. And the other thing I would say is just in favor of a sales tax issue versus the GO bond, besides that this would be much cheaper. I think the biggest issue is according to our traffic studies that we have done, the latest we've done, and as well as if you look at the housing study that was done through the Chamber of Commerce, that would have been a year ago, last March. When they look at that, the data there, which I've looked at it, between 9,000 and 11,000 or so people during the work week come into Ardmore. They're coming into work, they're coming into shop, or they're coming into medical facilities. Based upon our traffic studies and that housing study, we can conservatively assume then, when we have a town of 25,000 people, over 1/3 of our sales tax collection is coming from people that do not live in Ardmore. So if I can get the money cheaper, which was fewer and lower financing and bonding fees, more money to actually put in the streets in the project itself, and it's going to be paid for by people that do not live in Ardmore.
Kind of
a third of it.
Sharing the burden a little bit more, spreading it out a little bit more.
Absolutely, because they come in and drive on our streets.
And still using the resources here in town, the services and the infrastructure.
That the city had. Absolutely. And so to me, that makes the most sense. Now, if voters think that or not, I don't know. But I think coming up in the fall, you'll hear us start talking more. We're not looking at doing that until 2026, probably early in 2026.
Okay.
But I think part of our kind of philosophy is, we've done the data, we've collected the research, we can show you what we've been given, we can show you what the numbers are, even as high as they are, and then as a citizen, we think this sales tax route is the cheapest money we're going to get, paid by 1/3 of it from people that are not Ardmorites, but utilize all of our facilities and our roads. to me, that makes the most sense. And then it's really up to the taxpayers to decide if they want to do that or not.
When we're looking at a lot of the issues with the road conditions and especially the drainage, is a lot of the issues just because it's aging infrastructure? Was a lot of it because things may not have been engineered properly to make sure that there was infrastructure to handle this kind of stuff?
I'm sitting here kind of laughing to myself as you say it because I'm like, you're hitting all of it. It's all of the above.
Okay.
I've had several, I've been here long enough with the city of Ardmore. I've been in municipal government for 33 years, but 26 with the city of Ardmore. And so I've talked to several engineers over the years about our streets, and it's everything you just said. Okay. In some cases, they're just old, and they're just deteriorating. In some cases, it's like the one I just talked about, the blocks we did at 8th Street Northwest, when we talked those 3 blocks and how they did that. Well, if you go over there and look at it, and you say, man, Kevin, those 3 blocks are awesome. But if I go a block south or a block north, those are horrible.
Right.
And I'm going to say, you're right, Michael, it is. Well, the engineers have told me, like, in that specific neighborhood, they said, Kevin, when that was built, whoever engineered that did not even have any consideration for stormwater or where the water's going to go, drainage at all. Right. I mean, they're just bar ditches over there. I mean, there was none. So it was kind of like Sunset. When they first started that project, if you went over there, you saw these huge concrete stormwater boxes. Well, that was to direct the water to where it should be going, because you have to do all that before you build a street.
Right.
And so it is some of that. It's some of it that it was just not designed well when it was, and I can't tell you when that subdivision was built, but if you drive through there, I'm going to guess it was 50 plus years. Okay. I would just guess. So some of it is all the above. Part of it's deterioration. Part of it's the way it was designed. Like on our stormwater, a lot of our stormwater issues that go from some of the neighborhoods I was mentioning earlier about the collapsing storm drains and all that stuff. Well, part of it is it's like galvanized pipe. Well, some of that's galvanized pipe because 50 plus years ago, that was the standard.
That was the tech of the time.
That was the technology of the time. They're like, oh, this will last forever. No, it doesn't. We're
here 50 years later.
No, it doesn't. But we use updated, newer technology for pipes now that will last 100 years. And so part of it's that, part of it's the design. And then the other thing is that a lot of people don't realize is that especially between April of this year up through July of this year, we had a ton of rain. I mean, a lot of rain.
I think we had the wettest April in
I think it was
Oklahoma.
April and May, one of the wettest in the state of Oklahoma in history. Well, when you have bad streets that are cracked and it's, they're alligators, what we call it, with all the cracks running through it, and then water gets up underneath that, it speeds up the deterioration process. Okay. So I'm going to tell you, from April to now, I could drive you to half a dozen streets that in the last 4 to 5 months, I'm like, this thing it's 30 to 40% worse in months, not years, because of this happening. And I think the other thing too is that we have looked at our processes, working with our street guys, which do a good job. And one of the things we really looked at was some of the stuff we were patching potholes with, because they didn't seem to last very long. People would say, Kevin, I know you patched it. It's on my street. I saw your guys out there doing it. But like 6 weeks later, it's popped out. It looks just as bad as it did.
I can count a couple of those just on Rockford that I saw this morning.
I know it. And they're like, what's the deal? And I'm like, that's a great question. So we started talking to our street guys, and they're like, yeah, we're doing it. I was like, well, not just what we're using, but how are we using it? And so for me, it's just easier for me to see things firsthand sometimes, especially I don't come from the public works street department or street building world. So I went out myself, and Kevin Norris, assistant city manager, one day talked with Lee, and actually before that day, and said, hey, would you give us a truck with all of the HPs, what they call it, the material you used to pack in those big potholes and have it ready. And Kevin Norris and I are going to come over here in a day or two, and we're going to go out and just go some of these streets. And then I'm going to check those, like, every week, drive by where all we did it, and just, non-scientific analysis of, let's see how this works.
Kind of see how it's holding up.
It didn't. I'm going to tell you at least 50%, I'm going to say maybe closer to 60+% of everything that we run around on that day in field. And I can tell you, right, some were on Circle Drive, some was on Springdale Road, some was on Stanley Road, some was on Bixby over here. I mean, I can tell you, all the streets we went to fill potholes that day. but within a matter of weeks. And we had some rain so that regular 2 to 3 days a week rain period. They were just they weren't all out. They were deteriorating, and it was easy to see. So from that, I won't go into it to make it even more long-winded than it is, but we talked to several other people that build roads and get that material, and we kind of came to the conclusion the material we were getting was not good.
Okay.
It was not good. We were getting inferior resources. And so we've changed from that vendor to another vendor for the same product, and we're having better luck with it.
Okay,
but
good.
now the rain started to dry up some too.
So it's hard to compare.
It's hard to compare apples to apples when we don't have the same weather conditions.
Sure.
But it seems to be working better. Okay. It seems to be holding longer. But those are just, some of the processes that we go through. Again, I think this asphalt zipper is going to make a huge difference. I think when our guys start using it, I think those first 3 to 4 streets, it's going to take a while because it's going to be a new piece of equipment. Mm-hmm. And another thing is to kind of show what we can do with that. We've picked a block to work on, and we're going to invite our commissioners to come by when we're doing that kind of demo block first, so they can see it and this is how it's going to work and all that. And it's one of the blocks that when I went down there and looked at it, it looked like somebody had thrown 5 or 6 hand grenades down the block because there was just pothole, patch. You could see it. And so I thought, well, this is a perfect one. This is an example of a lot of streets in Ardmore. So we're going to do that demo, ask the city commissioners. We've already budgeted it, but them to come watch it in action, and we want them to feel confident as well. But we think after we do about 3 or 4 streets and they kind of get their feet wet of how this process is going to work, because it's a new process, I think it'll pick up some steam. Okay. And my personal goal is I would like to see 15 streets done. If we can in this budget cycle, if we can get 15 streets done, I'll be happy. I've already talked to Sandy, our finance director, and said, hey, if we get all those done and our asphalt contract's out of money, I'm going to be coming back. And she said, you're going to be coming back? And I said, yes, because I don't mind going to the city commission about this issue specifically and saying, hey, I'm out of money because we got 15 streets done. I need more. Because you know what that means? It means it's working.
I was going to say, if it sounds like it's going to be working, we may get some more support for that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, right. I'm all for doing things and trying new things and trying different resources. But at the end, you got to see results. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's what the citizens expect.
Sure.
And so I know that was kind of a roundabout way, but to really try to give detailed information of where we started. This isn't something that all of a sudden come up and like, oh, hey, we got to do something. No, we've started talking about this over 2 years, probably 3 years ago, when we started talking about the study and how do we analytically assess the condition and the drainage. Why do we have these drainage problems? What is the issue? How do we fix it? How much is it going to cost to fix it? And those things, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, those studies and engineering plans, they take time. But we feel now we've got a good path. And my hope is again, if we can get the sales tax passed, we can do $70 to $80 million worth of drainage and road projects all over town. When it comes time to renew it, people will say, yeah, I mean, we can drive and see you've fixed this, you've resolved this drainage issues, et cetera. You've done that. And then obviously, and if we don't, well, then you don't vote it back in. Right. I mean, that's what I would do as a citizen, because again, you want it to be results driven. And I think the citizens have seen the deterioration of our streets enough themselves and the flooding issues that we have that I think they can see it needs to be addressed. We don't have the option of kicking this can down the road, and that's not what we want to do.
To kind of bring this conversation back full circle, we had talked about how some of the drainage and street issues in town are because there wasn't enough planning done by previous administrations, previous generations into some of these, especially the drainage issues you'd mentioned. But going back to the new police station that's going to be coming to town,
absolutely.
How are the plans for that kind of future-proofing any sort of issues or even growth as the police department and public safety needs grow here in Ardmore in the future?
That's a great question. Well, how we're doing that is, first of all, we ended up hiring an architecture firm that specializes in public safety facilities. Actually here in Oklahoma, based out of Tulsa, Dewberry and Associates. We started working with them probably about 2 years ago. City Commission approved a contract with them. And really the first thing was assessing where we're at now, and then according to modern policing standards, where do we need to go? I mean, how do we get there? How do we get from where we're at to now to then? And part of that was people in our police station looking at whatever their respective is. So you're looking at the forensic lab part and all those issues. You're looking at dispatch and emergency communication issues. You're looking at when you do interview rooms, what those should have, what technology should have, what should you not. Because right now our interview rooms over at City Hall on the second floor, in my opinion, are glorified closets. I mean, if anybody wants to come see and take a tour, I'll be happy to give them one, and they can see the condition. I mean, again, the City Hall is, I think, 88 years old or somewhere in that, and the facilities we have are not only they're not nice, they're just not up to what current standards should be. So in the new one, we looked at all those things, looking at dispatch, looking at forensics, looking at, again, interview rooms, what those should be up standard. We looked at, right now, like in City Hall, if our emergency dispatch, if a tornado comes around Ardmore, which it does several times, they do it several times every year, they have to leave, that one person at least has to leave the dispatch area up on the second floor and go to the EOC emergency dispatch, which is in the basement. And there's one dispatch station there. And that's not really adequate. I mean, you would like, obviously, in cases of a tragedy or emergency, you'd think you'd want all the dispatchers to be able to do it. Well, we can't where we're at now. So the new police station will have more stations in it. It'll be built in a tornado-proof bunker, if you will, to meet current design standards for that, so that in the event a tornado came through Ardmore and we had the new facility, they stay right there doing what is most important at that time, and that's dispatching emergency services, which we can't do that now because of the setup. Other thing that a lot of people don't think about is when police officers come off duty, depending on what he or she has experienced or been a part of, a lot of times you have things on your uniform that you don't really want to take home. And it depends on what you've been involved in that day. Well, we don't have any locker rooms. We don't have anywhere for police officers to change. So in the new one, we'll not only have locker rooms, but we do have male and female police officers. So they're going to have separate locker rooms where they can take off whatever's happening that day, and they don't have to take that home and do, expose it all there. They can do it there. The other thing is we have a bigger training room, and I think for the future, for your point there, is on the second floor, this is about a 28,000 square foot facility. But on the second floor, if I remember correctly, there's about 3,000 square foot that's just a build-out box, so that as the department grows and needs grow, then that extra 3,000 feet will be divided out into whatever is needed.
Okay, be it
additional
offices or
or it could be some new technology that we need to add that we don't even know about now. I mean, something that's new. But that's why we did it. We built it out and designed it for the future. Our police officers deserve having a nice place in Ardmore. A lot of people may not realize this. We have great, dedicated men and women, and I have unfortunately been able to see them in action in some very terrible situations in Ardmore. And keeping those great officers is a challenge for us because a lot of times they will go to work for Light Horse for more money. They'll go to OSBI, or they'll go to OHP, Highway Patrol. It's more money. I hate it. We lost an officer several years ago that had been with us for years. He'd come up through the ranks, was at the rank of sergeant, and went to North Texas. Because he can go to North Texas doing basically the same rank, same job, and make $30,000 more a year.
Wow.
Well, having a nice place to work, having nice cars, having a safe environment that you can work on, that you don't, dread coming to work in every day, it's a recruiting tool. Not just to recruit new people, but to keep the ones you got. So I think all of that plays into the police station and the need for it. I completely understand as a city manager that as a citizen, if I collect 10 people in this room and I put a list on the wall of X amount of dollars and say, where do you think this X amount of dollars should be spent? How many different opinions do you think I'll get from those 10 citizens? If not
You're
10,
get 10.
if not 10, it'll be 8. Okay, because you might have a couple that agree. So I understand. There's a lot. It's like always. There are more priorities to address than there is funding to take care of. So as our great department heads that we have that are very, very intelligent and experts in their chosen field of study, I depend a lot on them because they are the subject matter experts, if you will.
Sure.
I depend on them, and then we also obviously have meetings. Then in some cases, we needed to go out and have a plan so we can get public input, like we've done recently. We finished the Trails Master Plan, had several public meetings. We did the Downtown Master Plan update, several public meetings, and do that. Of course, we do those too to help us kind of prioritize, well, what is the most important part of this project, whatever it is. But the thing about it is we have to sit down as a group and then sit down with the city commission at some point and say, this budget year, these are where these funds are going. I mean, at some point, you just have to make a decision, and you can't address every single issue. But I think on the streets and drainage, nobody in City Hall or none of our elected officials are going to disagree they need to be addressed. They've just been very patient with me in saying, let's assess and get good experts in here to help us ascertain exactly which streets are the worst, where is all the flooding at, how can we mitigate it and take it away, and what is it going to cost? Well, we've done those things now. So now is, how do we get it done? Because that's what the citizens care about. And
not just putting a Band-Aid on it, but actually trying to fix the root problems of these.
You're right. You just use the word I use. When I talk to the city commission, that's the word I've used in the past is what we're doing in a lot of issues now are putting Band-Aids on it, just what you said. And that is not a long-term goal or a long-term fix. It's not. But we realized Ardmore, in my opinion, where we're at now, with the growth that we've seen in the last 5 years or so, is that we're at a tipping point that if we don't try to address some of these major issues with streets and flooding are major issues, if we don't, I think you're going to see this deterioration and issues speed up even more. I think we're at that point. And it's not to scare somebody and say, well, if you don't do this, and that's not my goal. It's not my reason for saying that. It's just I believe in my position as a representative of the city commission and our staff is that I would honestly tell the citizens, if we don't do something soon, and then you look at any public works project, if I explain the high cost that they are, well, if we kick this can down the road in 10 years, it's not going to be $200 million. It's going to be more. And I think that's why it's important we get started. And I agree, too, that we as the city of Ardmore, we need to be held accountable if we get that tax money to do $70 or $80 million. We got to do it. And that's why the first project I said, we've started engineering that over a year ago, because I want to have something soon so that if it is approved and we get the voters and they approve on it in a very short period of time, and I'm talking about 6 months or less, that the first project is out to bid and that we start on it. And it's right now, it's that terrible condition of Mile Road from Rockford all the way to Valley Ranch, and taking care of that intersection because of that school district and where it's at. There's narrow road, no shoulders, no place for drainage. The bridge is just like what we're doing on it now, putting Band-Aids on it. Well, that's not what needs to be done. But, to fix it properly, it takes money. And I think that, we can articulate that well and explain it to the citizens. And my goal is to take that 70 or 80 million and try to have, because the city is divided into wards.
Right.
We have the wards, is to try to make sure we have at least a project in every single ward. One of the ones I know that's terrible that I've went and looked at, it's on our list, is over there where a lot of people call the tree streets.
Right.
Well, a lot of the reason that those streets are terrible is because the drainage is terrible. And every engineer I've talked to said, Kevin, you can't address the streets without addressing the drainage issue. You can't do it. They're tied together. So to me, it made sense to do the engineering study and the road assessment together because they need to be looked at together and figure out how they're tied together. Because ultimately our goal is to be, and it should be, to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars and to try to look at things strategically and say what makes the most sense, how can we stretch our taxpayers' dollars and make it efficient. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes because of why our purchasing policies are, or because it could be statutorily, there's some state laws, sometimes it makes it difficult to do that. They're like, Kevin, wouldn't it be just easier to go do A, B, and C? That's what I would do. And I'm like, you're right. It would be. But as a government entity, they have kind of all these things set up to basically make sure that they're done correctly, legally. You're not getting any kind of backdoor deals and all that, which they're all there for a reason. But when you do that, it draws the process out longer, and it also makes it, unfortunately, more expensive.
Right.
And I can't correct that. That's the thing I can't correct.
You're just having to work within the confines that are more or less given to you.
Oh, absolutely. And I've had one of our commissioners, I remember when he was first elected, after like 6 months, 9 months, whatever it was, he said, Kevin, you know the thing that I just didn't understand before I was elected? And I'm like, no, what? And he said, I just thought when we voted for something and we got it like in 3 or 4 weeks, said, hey, it's going.
Yeah.
And he's like, it doesn't work like that. And I said, no, sir, I'm sorry, it does not work like that. And it's frustrating to us too. And I know sometimes I think with citizens, it's nobody's fault. I just don't think they understand all the hoops and the steps that you have to go through when you're working with taxpayers' dollars. And again, I understand why they're there, but the way that they are is not the best thing for efficiency sometimes, to do the job efficiently. And that's why sometimes I know some things that the city of Ardmore is not involved in, they say, well, the city should be involved in this issue or that program. I'm always hesitant. I mean, to be honest with you, I am, because I'm like, I don't know if that's the right idea if you really want it done quickly and efficiently, because when we're involved, there's a lot of strings attached. And I think some citizens are just not aware of that.
On one side, it's a safety check, but like you said, sometimes it can just slow things down. And the whole idea of the wheels of government turning slowly, it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a cliche thing, but it is 100% true. And us as people that work with it, sometimes it can be frustrating as well. But I think for us, I think at the end of the day is we have a great community here. We have a great city here. We've seen a lot of positive things that have happened in the last 5, 10 plus years. And things I can tangibly go out and point and show you. But we, as any community, that doesn't mean we don't have our issues. And I think the streets and flooding are a big issue. I understand why people are upset, but I think we've done all the homework. Now's the time, if we're going to do something, that we got to really consider what the cost is going to be. And if you want to get behind it, then let's do it. Because I think it really, we are at a tipping point as a city that if we don't do it soon, the issues are, I think people say, well, it can't get any worse. Yes, I promise.
Let's not test that,
Let's
please.
don't touch it. We're gonna stay positive and go to that and go forward. And I'm going to tell you, be honest with you too. I think the majority of the people that I've talked with, because a few people have brought concerns to me about the streets and stuff, and I've kind of explained it to them, maybe probably not as in detail as I have today with you, but in doing it, they're just like, well, Kevin, I'm just glad to know that you're thinking about it and you're working on it. I just thought, well, nobody cares, or nobody, I'm like, absolutely not. No, that's not the case.
Well, Ardmore City Manager Kevin Boatright, thanks so much for joining us in the Junction this week to talk about the new police station, talk about the road and drainage infrastructure we've got in town, and thanks so much for your input on this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.